The clock on the wall showed 6 in the evening when Raymond pushed his cleaning cart through the back entrance of the Hartwell building. He did this every single day, Monday through Friday, for the past 7 years. Same time, same door, same blue uniform with his name stitched on the chest pocket. The lobby was still busy at this hour. Men in expensive suits walked past him without looking. Women in high heels clicked across the marble floor, talking on their phones about meetings and deadlines. To them, Raymond was just part of the furniture. Another thing in the background, like the potted plants or the water fountain near the elevator dot, he was 42 years old. And sometimes when he caught his reflection in the glass windows he had just cleaned, he barely recognized himself. There were lines on his face that weren't there 10 years ago. His hair was starting to gray at the temples. His hands were rough from years of scrubbing and mopping. But his eyes, those still held something. A spark that refused to die no matter how hard life tried to put it out. Raymond grabbed his mop and started with the East Corridor. He had a system. East Corridor first, then the conference rooms on the second floor, then the executive offices on the top floor. He saved the lobby for last because that's where the piano was. Yes, there was a piano in the lobby. A beautiful black grand piano that sat near the tall windows. It was mostly for decoration. Sometimes during company events, they would hire someone to play it. But most days, it just sat there, silent and waiting. Every night, after everyone had gone home and the building was empty, Raymond would stop in front of that piano. He never touched it. He just looked at it for a minute or two, the way a man might look at an old photograph of someone he used to love. Because here's the thing about Raymond that nobody knew. Not his supervisor. Not the security guard who nodded at him every night. Not a single soul in that building. Raymond could play the piano. And not just a little bit. He could really play. 20 years ago, he was a different person living a different life. He had a scholarship to one of the best music schools in the country. His teachers said he had a gift. The kind of talent that shows up maybe once in a generation. Record labels were interested. Concert halls wanted to book him. Everyone said Raymond was going to be somebody. And then he met her. Christina. She walked into a coffee shop where he was playing a small gig to make extra money. She had the kind of smile that made you forget your own name. They talked for 3 hours that first night. Within a year, they were married. Life was perfect. Raymond was finishing his degree. Christina worked as a nurse at the local hospital. They rented a tiny apartment with thin walls and noisy neighbors, but they didn't care. They were happy. They were building something together. When Christina got pregnant, Raymond thought his heart might explode from joy. They painted the spare room yellow because they didn't want to know if it was a boy or girl. They wanted to be surprised. Christina would put Raymond's hand on her belly so he could feel the baby kick. He would play piano for them both, and Christina swore the baby moved more when he played slow, gentle songs. The due date was in March. Raymond had already planned everything. He would graduate in May. He had a recording contract waiting. They would buy a little house with a yard. Everything was falling into place. But life doesn't care about your plans. Christina went into labor 6 weeks early. Something went wrong. Raymond still can't talk about those hours in the hospital waiting room. The white walls. The smell of disinfectant. The doctor's face when he finally came through those double doors. Christina didn't make it. She bled out on the operating table. But the baby survived. A tiny girl, barely 4 pounds, fighting for her life in a plastic box filled with wires and tubes. Raymond named her Grace. Because that's what Christina had wanted. For the next 3 months, Raymond lived at that hospital. He watched his daughter through the glass of the intensive care unit. He counted her tiny breaths. He prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. The medical bills started piling up. The recording contract fell through when he missed too many meetings. The scholarship expired when he couldn't finish his final semester. One by one, all the doors that had been opened for him slowly closed. But none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the tiny girl who was finally strong enough to come home. Raymond needed a job. He needed health insurance. He needed money for formula and diapers and doctor visits. The music industry didn't offer those things. Not for a broken man with a newborn who needed constant care. So he put his dreams in a box and shoved them into the back of his closet. He applied for the first job he could find that offered benefits. A janitorial position at a big corporate building downtown. That was 7 years ago. Now Grace was a bright, curious 7-year-old with her mother's smile and her father's stubborn spirit. She loved dinosaurs and strawberry ice cream and asking questions that Raymond didn't always know how to answer. She didn't know much about her mother. Raymond kept a photo of Christina on the living room shelf, and sometimes Grace would pick it up and stare at it. She was pretty, Grace would say, and Raymond would feel that familiar ache in his chest. They lived in a small apartment on the 4th floor of a building that had seen better days. The elevator worked only half the time. The hot water was unpredictable. But it was home. In the corner of their living room sat an old upright piano. It was the one thing Raymond had kept from his old life. The one thing he couldn't bring himself to sell no matter how bad things got. Every night, after Grace fell asleep, Raymond would sit at that piano. He would play softly, so softly that the neighbors couldn't hear. His fingers still remembered everything. The scales he had practiced for hours. The complicated pieces that used to make audiences gasp. The simple, beautiful melody that was Christina's favorite song. He never played during the day. He never played when Grace was awake. It felt like a secret, something just between him and the darkness. But sometimes Grace would ask him about it. "Daddy, why do you have a piano if you never play it?" And Raymond would smile and change the subject. Because how do you explain to a 7-year-old that some dreams hurt too much to hold? That sometimes the things you love the most are the things you have to let go of. So every night, Raymond pushed his cleaning cart through the back entrance of the Hartwell building. He mopped floors and emptied trash cans and cleaned toilets. He was invisible to everyone, but inside him, there was still music, waiting, hoping. He just didn't know that everything was about to change. It was the second Friday of October when Raymond first heard about the gala. He was cleaning the 3rd floor conference room when 2 women from the events team walked in, their arms full of fabric samples and seating charts. They didn't notice him. People rarely did. "This is going to be the biggest event in company history," one of them said. 50 years. "Can you believe it? Mr. Hartwell wants everything perfect." The other woman laughed nervously. "Perfect is an understatement. He's been calling my desk 3 times a day, asking about the flower arrangements. The man runs a billion-dollar company, and he's worried about flower arrangements." Raymond kept wiping down the table, moving slowly so he could hear more. It wasn't that he was nosy. He just liked knowing what was happening in the building. It made him feel a little less invisible. "What about the piano player?" the first woman asked. "Did we confirm him?" "Oh, yes. Theodore Walsh. He's flying in from New York the morning of the event. Very famous. Very expensive." But Mr. Hartwell insisted. He said his father had a pianist at the very first company gathering 50 years ago, so we have to have one now. Raymond's hands stopped moving for just a second. Theodore Walsh. He knew that name. They had been at music school together, back in another lifetime. Theodore had been good, but if Raymond was being honest, not as good as him. But Theodore had finished his degree. Theodore had gotten the record deals and the concert tours. Theodore had become somebody, and Raymond had become the man wiping down tables. He finished cleaning and pushed his cart out of the room. The women never even looked up. Over the next 2 weeks, the building transformed. Raymond watched it happen bit by bit during his evening shifts. Giant banners went up in the lobby, announcing the 50th anniversary celebration. Decorators brought in thousands of white roses. A crew spent 3 days installing special lighting that made everything glow like something out of a movie. And then there was the piano. They moved the old grand piano out and brought in a new one, a Steinway. Raymond knew what it was the moment he saw it. He had played on one just like it during his final recital at music school. The touch was like nothing else. The sound was pure and rich and perfect. The rental company had put a velvet rope around it. Nobody was allowed to touch it except the tuner who came in to prepare it. For the performance, Raymond found himself staring at it longer than usual during his shifts. Sometimes he would stand there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just looking. The security guard, an older man named Dennis, noticed one night. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Dennis said, walking over to stand beside him. Raymond nodded. "Yeah, it really is. You play?" The question caught Raymond off guard. Nobody had asked him that in years. "I used to," he said quietly. "A long time ago." Dennis smiled. "My daughter plays. She's 12. Drives me crazy with the practicing, but I love it. You should hear her play. She's going to be something special someday." Raymond felt something twist in his chest. "Hold on to that," he said. "Make sure she never gives it up." Dennis gave him a curious look, but Raymond was already pushing his cart toward the elevator. The night of the gala arrived cold and clear. Raymond had been asked to work the event, but not as a guest. He would be handling cleanup between courses, taking out trash, making sure the bathrooms stayed spotless. They gave him a slightly nicer uniform for the occasion. Black pants and a white shirt instead of the usual blue jumpsuit. He almost looked like he belonged. The lobby was stunning. Raymond had never seen it like this. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. White roses covered every surface. Women in long gowns and men in tuxedos filled the space, holding champagne glasses and laughing at jokes that probably weren't very funny. Raymond stayed near the service entrance, watching. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life. The Steinway sat in the center of everything, a spotlight making it glow. In about an hour, Theodore Walsh would sit down at that bench and play for all these important people. They would clap and cheer and talk about how wonderful it was. And Raymond would be in the back, emptying trash cans. He tried not to think about it too much. The CEO, Mr. Richard Hartwell, was easy to spot. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of posture that said he had never doubted himself a day in his life. He moved through the crowd shaking hands, accepting congratulations, playing the role of gracious host. His grandfather had started this company. His father had grown it. And Richard had turned it into an empire. Raymond had cleaned his office many times. Leather furniture, golf trophies, a photograph of a much younger Richard shaking hands with 2 different presidents. The man had lived a life most people couldn't even imagine. Near the bar, Raymond noticed a group of younger executives laughing loudly. He recognized one of them. Vincent Drake, the vice president of sales. He was the kind of man who wore his success like a weapon. Expensive watch, perfect teeth, a voice that carried across any room whether you wanted to hear it or not. Vincent had never spoken to Raymond directly, but Raymond had heard him talk about the help many times while cleaning nearby. The jokes he made, the way he looked at people in uniforms like they were less than human. Raymond did his best to stay out of Vincent's line of sight. At 7:45, 15 minutes before the performance was supposed to start, Raymond noticed something strange. The event's coordinator, a woman with a headset and a clipboard, was pacing near the piano. Her face was pale. She kept checking her phone and shaking her head. Then she hurried over to Mr. Hartwell and whispered something in his ear. Even from across the room, Raymond could see the CEO's expression change. The polished smile disappeared. His jaw tightened. He said something sharp to the coordinator, and she flinched like she had been slapped. Word spread quickly through the staff. Raymond heard it from one of the catering managers. Theodore Walsh wasn't coming. His flight from New York had been canceled because of weather. He was stuck at the airport with no way to get here in time. The famous pianist, the centerpiece of the entire evening, was not going to play. The events team was in full panic mode. They huddled near the service entrance, making frantic phone calls, trying to find anyone who could fill in at the last minute. But it was 8 o'clock on a Friday night. Every professional musician in the city was already booked or unavailable. Mr. Hartwell stood near the piano, his arms crossed, watching his carefully planned evening fall apart. 50 years of company history, and the celebration was about to become a disaster. That's when Vincent Drake strolled over with his group of friends. They had clearly been drinking, their cheeks flushed and their laughter a little too loud. "What's the problem, Richard?" Vincent asked, not even bothering with formal titles. "Where's our piano man?" Mr. Hartwell explained the situation through gritted teeth. Vincent let out a dramatic sigh. Then his eyes scanned the room and landed on Raymond, who was standing near the wall, trying to be invisible as always. A slow smile spread across Vincent's face, the kind of smile that never meant anything good. "Hey!" Vincent called out, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "What about him?" He pointed directly at Raymond. "The cleaning guy's been staring at that piano all night like it's his long-lost lover. Maybe he can play us a little song." The group around Vincent burst into laughter. Raymond felt his face go hot. Every eye in that corner of the room turned toward him. The janitor, the invisible man, suddenly very visible in the worst possible way. Vincent wasn't done. "Come on, what do you say? Give us a little chopsticks. Mary had a little lamb?" More laughter. Someone took out their phone, ready to record what they assumed would be an embarrassing moment. Mr. Hartwell turned to look at Raymond. There was no mockery in his eyes, just desperation. The look of a man who had run out of options. "Can you actually play?" the CEO asked. The room seemed to hold its breath. Raymond stood there, frozen. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He could walk away. He could shake his head and go back to his mop bucket and let this moment pass. That would be the safe thing to do, the smart thing. But something stirred inside him, something that had been sleeping for 15 years. He thought about Grace. He thought about the night she asked him why he had a piano he never played. He thought about Christina and the way she used to close her eyes when he played for her. He thought about all the years he had spent being invisible. Raymond looked at Mr. Hartwell. Then he looked at Vincent Drake and his smirking friends. Then he looked at the Steinway, glowing under the spotlight like it had been waiting for him all along. "Yes, sir," Raymond said, his voice steady. "I can play." The moment those words left his mouth, Raymond felt like he was watching himself from somewhere far away. Like he was floating above the room, looking down at this man in a white shirt and black pants, who had just agreed to do something insane. Vincent Drake laughed out loud. "Oh, this is going to be good," he said, elbowing one of his friends. "Somebody make sure you're getting this on video. This is going to be the highlight of my year." A few people in the crowd chuckled nervously. Others whispered to each other behind their hands. Who was this janitor? Was he serious? Was this some kind of joke? Mr. Hartwell studied Raymond for a long moment. There was doubt in his eyes, but also something else. Maybe curiosity. Maybe hope. When you're drowning, you'll grab onto anything that floats. "What's your name?" the CEO asked. "Raymond, sir." "Raymond Chun. Raymond." Mr. Hartwell nodded slowly. Do you understand what this event means? This is 50 years of my family's legacy. I need to know you can actually do this." Raymond swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to back out, to apologize, to disappear back into the shadows where he belonged. But then he saw Vincent Drake's smirk. He saw the phones being held up, ready to capture his humiliation. He saw all these people in their fancy clothes looking at him like he was entertainment, like he was nothing. Something hardened inside him. "I can do this," Raymond said. And for the first time in 15 years, he believed it. Mr. Hartwell made a decision. He waved over the events coordinator. "Get him to the piano," he said quietly, "and pray this works." The coordinator looked horrified. "Sir, are you sure?" "We don't even know if he can. We don't have a choice," Mr. Hartwell cut her off. "The guests are getting restless. We need music. He says he can play. Let him play." The crowd parted as Raymond walked toward the Steinway. It felt like the longest walk of his life. His work boots squeaked against the polished marble floor. He could hear whispers following him like shadows. "Is that the janitor? What is happening right now? This is either going to be amazing or a complete disaster." Raymond kept his eyes forward. He focused on the piano. That beautiful, gleaming instrument sitting under the spotlight like it was waiting just for him. When he reached the velvet rope, a staff member quickly unhooked it. Raymond stepped through. He could feel hundreds of eyes burning into his back. The piano bench was padded with black leather. Raymond pulled it out slightly, adjusting the distance the way he always used to. Muscle memory. Some things you never forget, no matter how hard you try. He sat down. The Steinway was even more beautiful up close. The keys were pristine white and black, perfectly weighted, perfectly tuned. Raymond placed his hands in his lap for a moment, just breathing. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. From somewhere behind him, he heard Vincent's voice. "Come on, cleaning man. Show us what you've got. Play us some Happy Birthday or something." More laughter. But it sounded nervous now, uncertain, like people weren't quite sure what was about to happen. Raymond closed his eyes. He thought about the first time he ever touched a piano. He was 6 years old. His grandmother had an old upright in her living room, and one day he walked over and started pressing the keys. She found him there an hour later, picking out a melody he had heard on the radio. She cried. She said God had given him a gift. He thought about music school, the practice rooms where he spent 16 hours a day, the professors who pushed him harder than he thought possible. The moment he played his first public concert and heard the applause wash over him like a wave, he thought about Christina, the way she would sit in their tiny apartment and listen to him play for hours. The way she said his music made her feel like everything was going to be okay. The way she looked at him like he was the most incredible person in the world. He thought about the night she died, the hospital, the silence, the months of darkness that followed. He thought about Grace, her smile, her laugh, the way she asked him questions about everything, the way she made life worth living again, even when he had forgotten how. 15 years of pain, 15 years of hiding, 15 years of being invisible. It all came down to this moment. Raymond opened his eyes. He lifted his hands and placed his fingers on the keys. They found their positions naturally, like coming home after a very long journey. And then he began to play. The first note rang out through the lobby, pure and clear. Then another. Then another. The opening of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. One of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. The effect was immediate. The whispers stopped. The laughter died. Every single person in that room froze where they stood. Vincent Drake's smirk melted off his face like ice in the sun. His phone hand dropped slowly to his side. His mouth fell open. Raymond didn't see any of this. His eyes were closed again. He was somewhere else now. Somewhere the fancy suits and the champagne and the mocking voices couldn't reach him. He was in his grandmother's living room. 6 years old, discovering magic for the first time. He was in the practice room at music school, his fingers flying across the keys, his professors watching in amazement. He was in the tiny apartment with Christina, playing her favorite songs while she rested her head on his shoulder. He was everywhere and nowhere. He was the music, the ballade built slowly, the way Chopin intended. Gentle phrases that grew more complex. Melodies that wove around each other like vines. Raymond's fingers moved with a precision and emotion that 15 years of mopping floors could not erase. The guests stood frozen. Champagne glasses hung in the air, forgotten. Conversations died mid-sentence. People who have been heading to the bar stopped in their tracks. A woman in a red dress put her hand over her heart. An older man near the window quietly removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. The music swelled. Raymond leaned into the piano, his body moving with the phrases. This was not just playing. This was everything he had kept locked inside for 15 years, finally breaking free. The pain of losing Christina. The fear of those months in the hospital with Grace. The exhaustion of working double shifts to pay the bills. The loneliness of being invisible. The ache of dreams abandoned. It all poured out through his fingers and into the keys and filled the room with something the words could never capture. Mr. Hartwell stood near the front of the crowd, completely still. His face had changed. The stress and anger from earlier were gone. In their place was something like wonder, something like recognition, because the CEO understood what he was hearing. This was not some amateur plinking away at the keys. This was mastery. This was the kind of talent that comes along once in a lifetime. This was a man who should have been famous, who should have been playing concert halls around the world, who had somehow ended up pushing a mop bucket through their building for the past 7 years. The first movement of the ballade reached its climax. Notes cascading like a waterfall, filling every corner of the massive lobby. Raymond's hands flew across the keyboard with a speed and precision that seemed almost impossible. And then, gradually, the music softened. The storm faded into something gentle and aching and beautiful. Raymond transitioned into a new piece without stopping. A melody that was simpler, but somehow even more powerful. Claire de Lune, Christina's favorite song. The one he had played for her on their wedding night. The one he had played for her in the hospital room before everything went wrong. The one he still played on the old upright at home, late at night, when Grace was asleep and the world was quiet. The tears came then. Raymond felt them sliding down his cheeks, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Not now. Not after all these years. He played for Christina. He played for Grace. He played for the boy he used to be and the man he had become. He played like his life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. The notes of Claire de Lune floated through the lobby like moonlight, made into sound. Soft, gentle, heartbreaking in the most beautiful way. Raymond played with his eyes closed, tears still running down his face. He didn't care anymore. He didn't care about the fancy people watching. He didn't care about Vincent Drake and his mocking friends. He didn't care about anything except the music flowing through him like water through a river. In the crowd, something was happening. A woman near the back started crying first. She didn't even know why. She had come to this gala expecting small talk and expensive food and maybe a nice performance. She had not expected to feel her heart crack open. Her husband put his arm around her. He was crying too. Then it spread, like a wave moving through the room. One by one, people felt something shift inside them. Something they had buried under years of meetings and deadlines and busy schedules. Something human. An older gentleman who had not cried since his mother's funeral 40 years ago felt tears sliding down his wrinkled cheeks. A young woman who had spent the whole evening thinking about her career suddenly thought about her grandmother, who used to play piano in her living room. A man who had flown in from overseas for this event found himself thinking about his daughter, whom he hadn't called in 3 months. The music did something that words never could. It reached into the secret places where people hide their sadness and their love and their regret. It found them there in the dark and brought them into the light. Near the front of the crowd, Mr. Richard Hartwell stood completely still, the CEO of a billion-dollar company. A man who had built an empire with his bare hands. A man who sat across from presidents and kings and never flinched. He was thinking about his father. Richard's father had died 8 years ago. They had never been close. Not really. His father was a hard man, a man of business, a man who showed love through expectations rather than words. Richard had spent his whole life trying to earn his approval and never quite succeeding, but there was one memory that suddenly came flooding back. Richard was 12 years old. It was late at night, and he couldn't sleep, so he crept downstairs. He found his father sitting alone in the dark living room, listening to a record. Claire de Lune, the same piece Raymond was playing right now. His father was crying. Richard had never seen his father cry before. He stood in the doorway, frozen, watching this man he thought he knew become a stranger. After a few minutes, his father noticed him there. "This was your mother's favorite song," his father said quietly. Richard's mother had died when he was a baby. He had no memories of her, just photographs and stories. His father patted the seat next to him. Richard walked over and sat down. They listened to the rest of the song together in silence. It was the closest Richard had ever felt to his father. They never talked about that night again. His father went back to being hard and distant. Richard went back to trying to earn his approval. But now, standing in this lobby, listening to a janitor play the same song on a $50,000 piano, Richard Hartwell felt something he hadn't felt in years. He missed his father. He missed his mother, whom he never knew. He missed the boy he used to be before he learned to hide his heart behind spreadsheets and profit margins. Richard removed his glasses. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He didn't care who saw. Across the room, Vincent Drake stood frozen. The smirk was long gone. The phone he had been holding hung limply at his side. The video he had planned to use for mockery was instead capturing something else entirely. Something that made him feel small in a way he hadn't felt since childhood. Vincent had grown up rich. Private schools, luxury vacations, a new car for his 16th birthday. He had never struggled for anything in his life. He had learned early that the world was divided into winners and losers, and he had made sure to always be on the winning side. He looked at Raymond, this man in his simple white shirt and black pants. This man he had called the cleaning guy and tried to humiliate in front of everyone. This man who played piano like an angel sent down from heaven. Vincent felt something uncomfortable twisting in his stomach. It took him a moment to recognize what it was. Shame. He had spent his whole career stepping on people like Raymond, making jokes at their expense, treating them like they were less than human because they wore uniforms instead of suits. And now here was Raymond, creating something so beautiful that it brought a room full of powerful people to tears. What had Vincent ever created? What had he ever contributed to the world besides sales numbers and cruel laughter? The music continued to build. Raymond played variations on a theme, his fingers dancing across the keys with impossible grace. Each note was placed perfectly. Each phrase told a story. This was not just skill. This was not just practice. This was something deeper, something that came from a place beyond technique. This was a man playing his soul, Near the service entrance, some of the catering staff had gathered to watch. They knew Raymond. They had worked alongside him for years. They had shared lunch breaks and complained about management and talked about their kids that none of them had known. He could do this. A woman named Patricia, who had worked in the building's cafeteria for 12 years, was sobbing openly. She didn't even try to hide it. Her friend handed her a napkin, but she just shook her head. "That's Raymond," she kept saying. "That's our Raymond." The security guard, Dennis, had abandoned his post by the front door. He stood at the edge of the crowd, his hand pressed against his chest. He was thinking about his daughter, the one who played piano, the one he sometimes complained about because of all the practicing. He was going to go home tonight and tell her how proud he was. He was going to sit down and listen to her play, really listen. For the first time in months, the music began to slow. The final phrases of Claire de Lune, gentle as a whisper, soft as a goodbye. Raymond played the last few notes with his eyes still closed. His fingers found their final positions. The sound hung in the air for a moment, pure and perfect and heartbreaking dot, then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Raymond sat at the piano bench, his hands in his lap, his head bowed. He was breathing hard. His cheeks were wet with tears. He felt empty and full at the same time, like something had been released from deep inside him. Something he had been carrying for 15 years. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then someone started clapping. It was Mr. Hartwell. The CEO stood at the front of the crowd, his glasses still off, his eyes red, bringing his hands together slowly and deliberately. Someone else joined in. Then another person. Then another. The applause grew. It built like a wave. People rose from their seats. Those who were already standing straightened up and clapped harder. Within seconds, the entire lobby was filled with the sound of hundreds of people giving a standing ovation. Not the polite, obligatory applause that usually followed performances at events like this. This was something different. This was real. People were cheering. Some were still crying. A few shouted, "Bravo!" Others just stood there, shaking their heads in disbelief, clapping until their hands hurt. Raymond finally opened his eyes. He turned slowly on the bench and looked out at the crowd. All these people who had ignored him for 7 years. All these people who had looked right through him, like he was made of glass. They were looking at him now, really looking at him. For the first time in 15 years, Raymond didn't feel invisible. He stood up from the piano bench, his legs a little shaky. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He had never been good at receiving praise, even back when he was a promising young musician with the world at his feet. The applause continued. It showed no signs of stopping. Mr. Hartwell began walking toward the piano. The crowd parted to let him through. His face was serious, but his eyes were kind. Raymond watched him approach, his heart pounding again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from hope. Something had changed in that room. Something had shifted. Raymond could feel it in the air, in the way people were looking at him, in the way the music still seemed to echo off the walls, even though the last note had faded minutes ago. For 7 years, he had been a ghost in this building, invisible, forgotten, just another man with a mop bucket. But ghosts don't make people cry. Ghosts don't earn standing ovations. Ghosts don't change the atmosphere of an entire room with nothing but their 2 hands and a piano. Raymond was not a ghost anymore. He was finally, fully, completely alive. Mr. Hartwell stopped directly in front of Raymond. The applause was finally starting to fade, but the energy in the room remained. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The CEO extended his hand. Raymond looked at it for a moment. In 7 years of working in this building, no executive had ever offered to shake his hand. He reached out and took it, Mr. Hartwell's grip was firm and warm. "That was extraordinary," the CEO said. His voice was thick with emotion. "I have attended concerts at the finest halls in the world. I have heard the greatest pianists of our generation. And I have never, not once, experienced anything like what you just did." Raymond didn't know what to say. His throat felt tight. "Thank you, sir," he managed. Mr. Hartwell didn't let go of his hand. "Where did you learn to play like that? How is it possible that you've been working in my building for 7 years and I never knew?" So Raymond told him. He told him about the scholarship to music school, about the professors who said he had a gift, about the record labels and the concert halls and all the doors that had been opening for him. He told him about Christina, about their wedding in a small church with only a handful of guests, about the tiny apartment where they planned their future, about the baby they were so excited to meet. He told him about the night everything changed, the early labor, the complications, the hours in the waiting room that felt like years, the doctor's face when he came through those doors. He told him about Grace, the 4-pound miracle who fought for her life in the intensive care unit, the 3 months of hospital stays, the mountain of medical bills that grew higher every day. He told him about the choices he had to make, the scholarship he couldn't finish, the contracts he couldn't honor, the dreams he had to bury so he could give his daughter a chance to live. As Raymond spoke, the people nearby listened in silence. Some of them had moved closer without realizing it. They wanted to hear this story. They needed to hear it. Mr. Hartwell listened without interrupting. His face changed as the story unfolded. The polished CEO disappeared, and in his place stood a man who understood something about loss and sacrifice and love. When Raymond finished, Mr. Hartwell was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "My father built this company from nothing," he said. "He started with a small office and a single employee. He used to tell me that a man's worth is never measured by his title. It's measured by his character, by what he's willing to sacrifice for the people he loves." The CEO paused. His voice dropped lower. "I forgot that somewhere along the way. I got so busy building an empire that I forgot what really matters. Tonight, you reminded me. You reminded everyone in this room." He finally released Raymond's hand and turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Hartwell announced, his voice carrying across the lobby. 50 years ago, my grandfather started this company with a simple belief. He believed that extraordinary people can be found in the most unexpected places. Tonight, we witness proof of that belief." He gestured toward Raymond. "This man has worked in our building for 7 years. He has cleaned our offices and emptied our trash cans. And not one of us, myself included, took the time to see him. To really see him. That is our shame. Not his." The room was absolutely silent. "Starting Monday," Mr. Hartwell continued, "there will be some changes around here. We are going to do better. We are going to see people. All people. Because you never know what gifts they might be carrying inside them." The applause that followed was different from before. It wasn't just appreciation for the music. It was something deeper. A room full of people recognizing that they had witnessed something important. Something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. After the speech, people came up to Raymond one by one. They shook his hand. They thanked him. Some of them apologized for never noticing him before. A few gave him their business cards and told him to call if he ever needed anything. Vincent Drake hung back at first. He stood at the edge of the crowd, watching, his face unreadable. Finally, when most of the guests had moved on to the dinner portion of the evening, he approached. Raymond tensed. He wasn't sure what to expect. Vincent stopped a few feet away. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. For a man who always had something clever to say, he seemed to have run out of words. "I'm sorry," he finally said. The words came out rough, like they had to fight their way past his pride. What I said earlier, the way I've acted, it was wrong. Raymond studied him for a long moment. He could hold on to anger. He would have every right to. But anger was heavy, and Raymond had been carrying too much weight for too long already. "Thank you," Raymond said simply. "I appreciate that." Vincent nodded awkwardly. Then he walked away, his shoulders slightly hunched. He looked like a man who had just realized he needed to change some things about his life. 3 weeks later, Raymond received a letter in the mail. It was on official Hartwell and Associates letterhead. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a job offer. Director of a brand new program called the Hartwell Arts Initiative. The company was committing resources to support music education in underserved communities. They wanted Raymond to lead it. The salary was more than triple what he made as a janitor. Full benefits, flexible hours, and he would get to work with music every single day. There was a second page attached to the letter. It described a new scholarship fund being established in partnership with Raymond's old music school. A full scholarship for single parents pursuing music education. Tuition, housing, childcare support, everything. The scholarship was named the Christina Chun Memorial Music Scholarship. Raymond had to sit down when he read that part. He sat at his small kitchen table and cried. Not sad tears this time. Something else. Something he hadn't felt in so long, he had almost forgotten what it was. Called hope, joy, gratitude, all mixed together into something he couldn't name. There was one more envelope inside the larger one, smaller, handwritten. Raymond opened it carefully. It was a personal note from Mr. Hartwell. Dear Raymond, it read, "My father used to say that music is how the heart speaks when words aren't enough. Your heart spoke to everyone in that room. It spoke to me. Thank you for reminding an old man what really matters. This scholarship is not charity. It is a small attempt to honor your wife's memory and ensure that other parents like you never have to choose between their dreams and their children. Please accept this as a gift from someone who was lucky enough to hear you play. With deepest respect, Richard." At the bottom, there was a postscript. P.S. I have also set up a college fund for your daughter, Grace. Every child deserves a father who plays piano like you do. And every father like you deserves to know his child's future is secure. That night, Grace came home from school full of stories about her day. She talked about her teacher and her friends and the book they were reading in class. Raymond listened to every word, the way he always did. After dinner, Grace noticed something different about her father. He seemed lighter somehow, like something heavy had been lifted off his shoulders. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked. Raymond smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached all the way to his eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said. "I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay." Grace tilted her head, curious. What happened? Raymond thought about how to explain it. How do you tell a 7-year-old that her father's life just changed forever? That all the years of sacrifice and invisibility had led to something beautiful? He decided not to explain. He decided to show her instead. "Come here," he said, walking over to the old upright piano in the corner. "Sit with me." Grace climbed onto the bench beside him. Her feet dangled above the floor. She looked up at him with her mother's eyes, full of trust and wonder. "Daddy, are you going to play?" "Yes," Raymond said. "And I'm going to teach you. Starting right now. Starting with your mother's favorite song." He placed his fingers on the keys. Grace watched carefully, the way she watched everything he did. "This is called Clair de Lune," Raymond said softly. "It means light of the moon in French. Your mother used to say it was the most beautiful song ever written. She would close her eyes when I played it and just smile." Grace's small face grew serious. I wish I could have heard her say that. Raymond felt the familiar ache in his chest. But it was softer now, gentler. "She's listening," he said. "Wherever she is, she's listening. And tonight, we're going to play for her. Together." He began to play the opening notes. Soft and slow, the way the song was meant to be played. After a few measures, he took Grace's tiny hand and placed it on the keys. "Press this one," he said, guiding her finger. "Right here." "That's it." Grace pressed the key. A single note rang out, joining her father's melody. She looked up at him with the biggest smile he had ever seen. "I did it, Daddy." "You did," Raymond said, his voice thick. And that's just the beginning. Outside their small apartment, the city hummed with its usual noise. Cars honked. Sirens wailed. People rushed home from work and school and all the busy places that fill up a life. But inside that little living room, on a piano that had seen better days, a father and daughter played together for the first time. The music wasn't perfect. Grace hit wrong notes. Raymond had to stop and show her the same keys over and over. They laughed when she made mistakes. They celebrated when she got something right.